Well, it's now been 19 days since Russia invaded Ukraine, and there is no end in sight to the relentless shelling of Ukrainian cities. As Russian troops continue to inch closer to the capital city, the United States has opened its communications channel with China. The US National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and China's top diplomat, Yang Jiechi, have arrived at the venue in Rome. The American and Chinese officials are meeting at Rome's Cavalieri Waldorf Astoria Hotel. These talks can potentially have far-reaching and significant consequences, not only for the ongoing war in Ukraine, but for China's relationship with the West. The West is concerned that Beijing might take further steps to aid its strategic partner, Russia. According to the latest US media reports, Moscow has asked Beijing for military assistance in Ukraine, including drones. But China has denied it was asked by Russia for military equipment or any other assistance to support the war in Ukraine. When asked whether Russia had asked China for military assistance, Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijiang called the claims disinformation peddled by the United States against China.
Recently, the US has been spreading successive disinformation targeting China on the Ukraine issue with malicious intentions. China's position on the Ukraine issue has been clear and consistent.
Today's meeting between Yang and Sullivan is seen as furthering a move towards better communication laid out by the presidents of the US and China in their summit late last year. The two sides will discuss ongoing efforts to manage the competition between their two countries, as well as the impact of Russia's war against Ukraine on regional and global security. But the United States National Security Advisor has warned Beijing against helping Russia, threatening the communist regime with sweeping sanctions. Well, our correspondent Susan Tarani is joining us live from New York. Susan, what are the expectations for this meeting that's taking place in Rome today?
Right. Nick, as you mentioned, it really comes in the backdrop of those claims by the United States and confirmed by a number of media outlets that Russia did indeed ask for military aid from China, and definitely that's really going to be at the forefront of these discussions. And as Jake Sullivan mentioned on Sunday, despite the denial by the two sides, Russia and China, the United States really wants to make clear that there will be economic consequences like sanctions if China goes ahead and provides that kind of military aid and tries to save Russia in one way or the other from sanctions imposed by the West. It was interesting that Sullivan said there will be absolutely consequences for, quote, large-scale sanctions evasion efforts or support to Russia to backfill them. So it's not yet clear whether or not small-scale sanctions evasion efforts will be punished by the United States on the part of China or not. But also on the agenda, ongoing efforts to manage competition between these two countries, the world's largest economies. This meeting was going to take place regardless of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. These two sides had been meeting even prior to that highly publicized meeting between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. However, as meetings between these two countries often go, even according to U.S. officials, not much is supposed to really come out of this meeting. There isn't supposed to be some kind of grand statement or anything coming out. Low hopes among administration for any breakthrough for this. It's not about negotiating any specific issue or outcome. However, the U.S. official, this is a quote coming out of the NSA, saying that the meeting is taking place in the context of Russia's unjustified and brutal war against Ukraine, and as China has aligned itself with Russia to advance their own vision of the world order. Now, despite these claims by the United States that Russia has asked China for military aid, it's not yet clear whether or not China would even want to get into that territory and help Russia, considering the fact that it does see some of its own interests being jeopardized. So we'll wait and see what really comes out of this meeting, but definitely low hopes, and the issue of Ukraine and Russia at the forefront, but also a lot of issues pertaining to economic competition between the two sides as well.
And Susan, as you mentioned, there are low hopes, low expectations for this meeting. It was already planned even before the invasion by Russia of Ukraine. Is there some hope, at least, that this may begin to put Washington and Beijing back on some sort of diplomatic path to improve relations, even if there's no specific outcomes coming out of this meeting?
You know, it's hard to talk about this meeting out of the context of the Russia-Ukraine invasion, but I think just it's important to note that, first of all, it'll be interesting to see whether or not reports and assumptions are true that, along with other European capitals, if Beijing is interested in taking a mediation effort and trying to provide Russia and the United States with an off-ramp regarding the current conflict in Ukraine, and whether or not it wants to play mediator between the two sides. So perhaps that might be one aspect of it. Another aspect would be, considering the fact that Russia is really asking Beijing for these military aids. If that report is true, it signifies that Russia is really in need and does not have the proper military equipment. Again, that really puts these discussions on the forefront that perhaps Beijing really didn't expect the invasion to take such a left turn, and it's reconsidering that kind of pact that it made with Moscow before the Olympics. So there might be some kind of realignment. But, relationships between the United States and China have been at an all-time low in recent months. It's hard to imagine that anything substantial would come out of this meeting. But I think China is really walking on eggshells right now, because it's watching how the United States responds to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it can't help but wonder how to move really strategically in dealing with the United States on the one hand, and its future and aspirations for Taiwan on the other.
Thank you, Susan. That was Susan Tarani joining us live from New York City.